Do you remember, Simon? I remember going into your studio and Seb Cole was there. This is before they ever offered me that opening ceremony. I remember him being there, sat there, and I came in after him. You were interviewing him for something. I think probably because obviously he was involved way before I was involved, and I think you were interviewing him about how it was going, and I think I was coming in flogging Slumdog, I think.
So are we sort of partly responsible for you being involved in the opening ceremony?
I think you could probably certainly claim that.
Yeah.
Without a sense of controversy arising.
So was that the first time you'd met?
I think it was, actually. I mean, he wrote to me. I think because what happened is, the first thing that ever happened is because he's partly Indian, he has an Indian grandmother, I think, or an Indian mother. He wrote me a letter after he saw the film, saying that he was so sorry that his relative had died and that she couldn't. I think it was his mum, actually, that she died before the film came out because he'd have loved her to have seen. He wrote me this long, beautiful letter. It wasn't like a tactic. It was, to get somebody involved in the. I don't think he had his eye on that. He was just genuinely responding to the film and the view of India it gave. And he took his sons to see it, and he wanted them to see it with their grandmother, but she'd sadly passed away. And then, like a couple of years later, when we were doing 127 hours, actually, they offered us the job. So actually, you could definitely spin that as being. It all began in the Simon Mayo studio.
Danny, can I just say the Simon Mayo and Mark Kermode studio? I mean, I know I'm just the sidekick, but
I just don't remember you being there at that moment. I don't think you were there on that particular occasion. I think you were phoning it in from Brighton, actually, on that particular occasion, as I remember.
That sounds like him. So was there a moment in the opening ceremony where you thought of having a graphic representation of me and Mark, sort of maybe spelt out by dancers with drums?
We were, all the icons of the nation went up on the walls in pictures, and obviously you two were there.
Excellent.
Well, I did feel obviously you were nodding your head toward me with the tubular bells, because I know and you know why you were using tubular bells then.
I knew you would see that moment.
I
absolutely.
did.
That for so many people, that was a moment of innocence. But for those of us who know, it was a moment of The Exorcist arrives in the mainstream at last.
Thank you for that, Danny.
Now, look, and when the weather is really, really hideous, and when the economy is, shall we say, less than encouraging, having Danny Boyle on the show actually will cheer people up. You are the source of our optimism, Danny.
Oh, I've got to be careful with all this. We've managed to get ourselves on the front page of The Sun this morning for absolutely no apparent reason, apart from the fact there's clearly nothing but bad news out there.
Well, and this is your suggestion that the Olympic spirit had somehow been killed off by.
Yes, it's a bit tenuous the way they dragged that out of the actual interview, but then, they are resourceful. They can do what they want, I guess.
Yeah, well, so look forward to tomorrow's headline, which is Danny Boyle admits satanic shocker in Olympic ceremony.
While snubbing film critics.
Exactly,
But I suppose it was. We'll talk about your movie in just a second. But looking at that headline, it was inevitable, wasn't it? Given the fact it's been pretty grim for a while, that fantastic sense of optimism that everybody had was going to just sort of slip away a little.
Yeah, but it was. I think it's also. I mean, they didn't really go into this, but the truth of it is that I think we all knew that what we were doing was a moment where we all came together and celebrated something that's. We are brilliant, actually, but you can't tell yourself that the whole time, because we do have a natural inclination towards the cynical, certainly towards anybody who thinks they're God's gift is going to get their comeuppance very quickly. And we are a nation like that. We tend to emphasise that. And so this was different, but it was a moment that we all needed, I think, and we needed to actually say, yeah, we're all right. This is a modern progressive nation, despite all our self-criticism, which is most welcome most of the time. But occasionally we should celebrate that. And the truth is, of course, as is actually the truth, economically it's very tough for people, and it's going to get tougher as well, come April, which is, ironically, is coming towards us with a howling wind, and it is going to be very, very tough for people. And you've got to remember that as well, that, those of us lucky enough to be in the entertainment profession, we only occasionally occupy that stage for good reason. But most of the time, people have a struggle, and you've got to be. Well, it's my kind of. I believe my kind of credo is that thing, and it goes all the way back to Plato. He said, "Be kind, because everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle," and that's It's never been truer than now, really, for people, I think.
And just on the chronology of this, Danny, so all this Olympic chat is relevant because you were making this movie at the same time. Just explain how one cut from the other and how your time was divided and how you managed to make a movie at all whilst conducting this ceremony.
Well, we had the contract, if you like, or the is like a 2-year contract to do the. Was 2010, 2011, and then deliver it in 2012. And yet we knew in kind of signing up for it that it wasn't going to be absolutely. Well, you could be there the whole time, but you would go mad in committees and procedures and just the general admin. So we managed to negotiate a sabbatical in the first year when we did Frankenstein at the National Theatre, and a sabbatical in the second year, 2011, where we shot Trance. So what we would do is we'd work Thursday and Friday on the Olympic Games, and then Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we'd go off and shoot Trance in the same area, East London. And it was actually invigorating because obviously it's such a different tone and such a different shade compared to the Olympic Games that they kind of fed each other really in a way and reinvigorated your appetite for the Olympic Games, and that would reinvigorate your appetite to tell the dark story of Trance, really.
So, Danny, when I saw Trance, I got very theatrically given a letter as I came out of it, which was a letter signed by you, which said, now you've seen Trance and you've understood its secrets, please swear by all things holy not to reveal them. So, to do something I wouldn't normally do, because I don't want to tread on the film's narrative toes, can you, as much as you would like to, describe for listeners who haven't seen it, essentially the setup of Trance, as far as you'd like to go with it without revealing those secrets?
Well, that's very kind of you, Mark. It's actually an attempt to try and, obviously it is a revelatory movie, is there a increasing sense of revelations towards you get to the end, and preceding that it's a puzzle, and a puzzle of the character's own making, and you want people to enjoy trying to solve that puzzle as they engage with the film and with the characters. But basically it's about James McAvoy initially, who is a fine art auctioneer and is involved in the stealing of a painting from his own auction house, an inside job with a criminal gang. He appears to double-cross the gang, and as any kind of self-respecting criminal gang, especially one led by Vincent Cassel, would do, an associate who double-crosses them and receives appropriate punishment. That fails to elicit where the painting is because he claims it's induced, the blows he received induce amnesia. They therefore, Vincent Cassel being a bright guy and a lateral thinker, they turn to Harley Street and a hypnotherapist. McAvoy picks out of Yellow Pages a hypnotherapist, played by Rosario Dawson, so she's an American, professional, and she's brought in to try and explore his mind to see if they can uncover the memory of where this painting went on the day it was stolen, because it's vanished. No one seems to be able to find it. And what she does is she delves into his mind through a series of trances, which go deeper and deeper into his psyche and uncover more and more. And that's the kind of premise of the film, if you like.
The film's reunited you with John Hodge, who, of course, you worked with for Shallow Grave, Trainspotting, Life Less Ordinary. And behind John Hodge's script, there's also the Joe Ahern story, which was originally a television movie. Is that right?
Well, originally, Joe wrote the story first, and he sent it to me a long time ago, actually after Shallow Grave. And but he didn't want me to direct it, which surprised me, because I was fascinated by it straight away. He wanted to direct it himself, so he went off and he made a small budget television movie of the story, and we then got the rights. I couldn't forget about it. I was longing to make the film for a long time, and we got the rights from Joe. Very kindly gave us the story rights, and John Hodge began work on the script a couple of years ago, actually, pretty much after Slumdog. And we developed the script ourselves. So it's not fair to describe it as a remake or indeed anything that really resembles. It would be very unfair to compare. Joe had very little money, and it is, it's been developed beyond that initial premise of the story.
Sure.
But it's right to give Joe a credit because obviously it was his story originally. And the central premise of a woman at the absolute heart of the film is true to his original, and also something that I desperately wanted. I'd never made a film with a woman who's in the engine room of the film, which is if you watch the film, you'll increasingly see that Rosario Dawson is. And I love that about being able to make a movie like that.
Tell us about her character, because you've described her, you've said that some people could interpret her as a femme fatale, but what you were trying to do was to do a twist on the classic femme fatale. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, at one point in the film she behaves as the classic femme fatale from noir, really. She uses her allure, her sensuality, her beauty to entrance these men. It's a kind of one of the trances, if you like, and to turn them against each other in jealousy, and also towards her own end goal, if you like. But she's not your classic icy blonde, and it's not a cool film in that sense. There's an element of the story that you hear eventually that with her comes an emotional story, a story of some damage, and also of some incredible resourcefulness about why she turns to that persona during the film of the femme fatale in order to overcome the insurmountable odds which actually she faces. And you'll realise all that as you watch the film.
Just picking up on one of the things that you said just a moment ago, Danny, about never having done a movie with a woman in the engine room, to use your phrase. Was that something you became aware of and that you wanted to correct? Or was it something that you always intended to change?
I became increasingly aware of it. I've got 2 grown-up daughters who increasingly reminded me of it, as they do. Your biggest critics are right at home, and I was very. I wanted to address it very, very much so. I'd been lucky to work with some fantastic actresses, Kerry Fox, Tilda Swinton, to name just a couple, really, and Naomi Harris, who's obviously good now entrenched in the Bond films. I've been very, very fortunate to work with those, amongst others. But I'd never really done a film where the central... You realise that ultimately, when you get to the end of the film, the central pivot of the film is the woman. And I was delighted to be able to make what you hope is still an immersive and visceral and thrilling film, but it actually has at its centre, surprisingly, is a woman.
Rather bizarrely, and you mentioned Kerry Fox, I came into work today on the tube and she was standing next to me. So I said, I'm going in to talk to Danny Boyle, and she said to say hello. It's not a great or profound message, but there you go.
Well, people
still a very, very nice one. It's good to hear everybody's still travelling on the tubes. That's excellent.
People always forget that, of course, it was Kerry Fox's name that got Shallow Grave bankrolled, because at the time she was the star. She was the bankable star of that, that trio. She was the most famous.
Listen, that was the reason we got £1 million from Channel 4 and the Glasgow Film Fund to make that film, because we had a star in it, which was Kerry Fox, because she'd made Jane Campion's film Angel at My Table. And she was so she was first cast, and then we had to cast the men around her. And we ended up with Ewan McGregor and Chris Eccleston, who eventually turned into Obi-Wan Kenobi and Doctor Who, 2 masters of the universe, rotating around Kerry Fox, but she was absolutely the stellar star. Absolutely,
I'll tell her that next time I see her on the tube.
On the tube.
And I, Mark, I mean, your theory. Yeah. You think that Trance is closer to Shallow Grave than any other of Danny's films?
Yeah, because obviously it's a trio of characters. The key thing is that you don't trust, or in fact, you don't even have to particularly like any of them. You just have to be interested by them and puzzled by them. And actually that does go right back to Shallow Grave, right to the idea of Shallow Grave opening with a voiceover and then having this kind of puzzle structure. I mean, you feel that connection, Danny? Yes,
absolutely. We're very aware of that, and we deliberately set McAvoy running at the beginning of it as a reliable narrator. So you, in the way that you expect Chris Eccleston's voiceover at the beginning of Shallow Grave to be your guide, okay? That was stolen from Sunset Boulevard, because actually he's a dead narrator. You don't realise that until the end of Shallow Grave.
Thanks for spoiling Sunset Boulevard for everyone who hasn't seen it.
We'll get letters.
Oh no, the spoiler alert. Sorry, you can insert that. But yeah, and McAvoy, who has that warmth about him, that charm, that, he has a voiceover. He appears to be your guide. He appears, he's successful. He's looking at camera. He appears to be able to guide you through the beginning of the film. And obviously, where his character ends up is a very, very different place. That's a great journey for him to make, and it's lovely for us as filmmakers to play on, which character should you follow, and you tease really with their initial appearance. And Vincent Cassel, we've seen him as a great French gangster. He can do it very well. So you think, oh, here he is again as a French gangster. But by the end of the movie, he's like some kind of speechless teenager who's in the path of love and late in life expected love, so it's you try, and it's lovely to be able to change people's expectations and experiences of character.
Tell us about the soundtrack, Danny. People are very interested in the sound and the music which is going to come out of this film. You're working with Rick Smith from Underworld. How would you describe the music and the soundtrack here?
Well, we started off. It's really interesting. You often have a lot of influences at the beginning that you express, and one of them was Bowie's Low album, actually.
Because there's a bit of Be My Wife in there, isn't there?
There is indeed. There's a sample of it right in there, which is an acknowledgement of that influence. It comes from an Uncle track, actually. A band called Uncle sampled him, and we used that. But we also, Rick developed the soundtrack so that there's occasional respites, which are these songs, like a bit of Be My Wife, a bit of Chanson d'Amour, some beautiful songs in it, which are occasionally, and there's sort of respites from the journey that you're making, the pulsating journey into trance, really. And Rick developed the score like that to kind of hurtle you towards this psychological canvas that eventually the film is set in, which is deep inside trance, deep inside the human mind. McAvoy's mind, as it happens in this case.
You mentioned David Bowie. How close were you to persuading him to come and perform at the ceremony?
Well, he agreed to meet, and I went to meet him in New York, which was a buzz for me, to meet one of your all-time heroes who I'd never met. And I think he was fascinated by what we were going to do, and he was very complimentary about it and very helpful in terms of providing music and the rights and any video images we wanted and stuff like that. But he was clear he didn't want to make a live appearance, which would have been a coup for us on the night. But it's very good sometimes not to have absolutely everything you want. It's a good reminder sometimes, that you don't. So we were only able to represent his spirit and his songs rather than represent him in person.
Did you know that he had an album coming out? Because everyone seemed to be completely surprised when it turned up. But it just occurs to me that you, if anyone, might have been given this secret.
No, he didn't. He didn't give any indication. Though I do remember thinking. I didn't ask him. I was too nervous to ask him, But I do remember thinking as I left, that won't be the last we hear from him, will it? I remember thinking that. But it was just like the most casual thought you ever have in your, which you just dismiss as being something very, very casual. But clearly he must have been working then on the album that's appeared now, yeah.
The main influence, I would say, behind Trance, and it's something that you've acknowledged before, is Nick Roeg. The idea of the kind of mosaic structure of time, the fact that the thing plays like a puzzle.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the influence of Roeg very tangibly? Because I know you talk about him incredibly enthusiastically, and you've often said that he's one of your great mentors, along with Alan Clark. How important is he to you?
He is, and it's a huge influence on this film. And it's interesting because people compare the film, it's in the same territory as films like Memento, Inception, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And those filmmakers all credit Nick Roeg as a huge influence. And he did something very special, I think, that he emphasised how unique cinema is in dealing with time present. But time present encompasses time past, time future, time imagined, memories, illusions. All of it passes as real, as present now in front of you. I don't think there's any other medium other than cinema that does that immerses you in a time present which is a construct of the filmmaker's own making, really. And obviously that's the device of this film as well. And the shock when you come out of that are the revelations which reveal which is which, really. So he was the genius at that. And I think he achieved something in his work which is much more profound than perfection, which weirdly is easy to admire but difficult to love, I think. What he achieved was something truly like the enigma of film, the mystery of film, which is very precious in his work and makes me a lifelong devotee of him. I was delighted to have a little bit of his work in the Olympic opening ceremony because it should be there,
You are wrong, by the way, Danny, about not doing Bond, because you would make a great Bond director. But I know you've already ruled yourself out because it costs too much money or something nonsensical, some ridiculous reason.
Well, we've made our Bond movie now. It's just very short, but stellar cast.
Yes, that's true. I mean, where do you go from there? But because you are now a national treasure forever, we're fascinated.
Well, hang
by...
on, you haven't seen Trance yet. I mean,
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. That'll sort them out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but actually, Danny, there is an element of it which it is like that. It is like you've come out at the end of the Olympics, you got offered the OBE, said, not only do I not want the OBE, here's Trance, which felt to me like you going, excuse me, I'm not a national treasure, I'm something else.
Yeah, well, I think I actually...
terrible.
Well, I don't know about that either, but I was certainly very honoured and very privileged to do that Olympic opening ceremony. But it is a one-off, and it's kind of, you don't want to take any advantage of it, and nor should you get that, because the privilege in itself was actually doing it. And you've got to get back on your bicycle and actually make the work you want to make for the cinema, which is your life's job, really, I guess. The Olympics is a once-in-a-lifetime thing.
So is it Trainspotting? Is it the period dramas? What is the follow-up to Trainspotting? Obviously, what is it that's going to be fascinating and intriguing you next, Danny?
Well, obviously, every time I come on your show, I tease. It must appear like a tease, Trainspotting 2, or T2 if James Cameron or let us use the title. But it's genuine. I think we genuinely want to, and it's approaching like the 20-year anniversary. We would really love to go back to those characters played by those same actors, but with that passage of time clearly evident in them. And evident for everyone in the story and in their own experiences as well. That it becomes like we had they used it wonderfully in The Likely Lads, and 10 years later they did Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads. And it's a moment of national recognition in a way. So that will be because those characters have stayed in people's minds in a way that's very unusual for any kind of film, really. And it'd be lovely to make a sequel that's actually has its own integrity rather than just feeling like you're cashing in on something that was popular. So that's certainly something that we're beginning to work on. And ironically, actually, we've got a couple of. I know we didn't really realise this until you come to do the promotional tour. We're working on a couple of period movies, which are very, very early stages, but are promising, yes.
Okay, what sort of period?
Can't tell you that, because that would really give it away, and everybody would start, somebody else could go, oh, no, I'll do that as well then, and, suddenly you've got a battle. Hollywood's always, the movie industry always manages to make two of everything, don't they? There's always two volcano movies or two... meteor movies at the same time. So we want to avoid that.
Toby Jones will be in the other one.
The Lonnie Donegan story still hasn't been done, and I don't think Hollywood will be jumping on that. So if I could just point your head that way, Danny, someone's got to do it. It should be you.
You should write the script, Mark. You should definitely write it up. How you see it, and good luck with it.
Danny, a pleasure as ever. Thank you very much indeed for coming on, sir.
Thanks very much, guys. Nice to talk to you again.